Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Limb Loss and Limb Difference Awareness Month, presented by Crown Family Films. Today, our guest is Cam Ayala. I met Cam last year at the triathlon held in San Diego that was put on by the Challenged Athletes Foundation. I was very impressed with Cam and his positive attitude and his grace, and I wanted you to have an opportunity to meet him too. So welcome, Cam. Thanks for coming on board and sharing some of your story. And I'd like for the audience to know just who is the Cam man?
Well, thank you for having me, Marcy. I guess just for starters, as you just announced, my name is Cam Ayala. I'm currently 34 years young. I live in downtown Houston, Texas, and I am an above-knee amputee. It's been less than a year now, so excited for our conversation.
What are some of your interests? Like, where would you find Cam in a day-to-day life?
Right. Okay. So I have a pretty busy schedule Monday through Friday. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this as the conversation unfolds. But for me, I live alone. And so I like to stay busy. And because I currently work remotely, I'm trying to get myself out of my apartment at least 2 or 3 times a day, every day. So basically, Monday through Friday, it's filled with different things from doing CrossFit at my local CrossFit gym. I'm on the Houston Rolling Rockets wheelchair basketball team. I also play for the Houston Heat sitting volleyball team. And then on Thursday nights, I volunteer at a boxing gym where I help train inner city underprivileged kids the discipline of boxing and self-defense. So that's my Monday through Friday. Every night there's something fun and exciting.
Tell me about that sitting volleyball. Is that something that, had you played volleyball before your leg was amputated and you wanted to just keep going or?
Yeah, I'd actually had never even seen or heard of sitting volleyball until after my amputation. And I think this is really common with a lot of individuals with limb difference or limb loss who are kind of new to that community, and that they're still, relatively active or wanting to explore so many different sports. I've kind of been in this whole, it's been about 9.5 months since my surgery of just this constant state of curiosity and exploration and finding out what my new body can do. And fortunately, here in Houston, where I reside, there's an adaptive sports facility ran by the city of Houston, and they have so many different clubs and sports that people can kind of experiment and try. And so far, I've really gravitated towards wheelchair basketball because I'm a former able-bodied basketball player. And then now, probably the past 2 months, have started to get more involved with the seated volleyball sport. So lots of fun things to try and explore. So there was this common misconception that people assume a couple of things. One, that I had to get the amputation because of my lymphedema and the chronic infections that
Right, that
occurred.
was my question too.
Right. And then misconception number two is that just because I've had the amputation that my lymphedema is cured or it's gone. So unfortunately, both of those scenarios are not true. I'm by no means cured from my lymphedema. And in fact, currently there are no known proven medical cures for the disease lymphedema, whether you have primary like me or secondary, which is much more common. That's the acquired disease state. A lot of times you still have some challenges with the lymphedema, even in the residual limb, because the circumference of my residual limb does fluctuate so much because of the fluid and the swelling, which has made it a little bit of a challenge getting the proper socket for my prosthetic. And this is still a temporary one. And I should be getting my second iteration of that socket this Friday, which will then allow me to get fitted for a running blade and not this everyday leg that's just kind of meant for walking. So getting that running blade will then allow me to basically be able to jog and run for the first time in 7 years, which I'm really excited about. Well, with my previous leg, I was a 3-sport athlete from as long as I can remember, I guess, age 3 and 4, all the way up until my mid 20s. I even played able-bodied college basketball, even with the lymphedema. In fact, I
Okay.
was the first NCAA basketball player to play with lower extremity lymphedema. But it was really in my mid 20s when I started having these reoccurrences of infection in the
Oh,
bone in my
okay.
knee joint that
Okay.
pretty much sidelined me from sports. So I was constantly in and out of the operating room. And then obviously with each surgery, then you have the post-op physical therapy, learning how to walk again, learning how to weight bear. And, for me, it was just this constant ebb and flow of, one step forward, 20 steps back. And so that's really kind of what made the decision for me to amputate my right leg. Somewhat of a no-brainer. I mean, not an easy decision to make because no one really wants to opt into losing a limb. But when you get to a certain point, which in my case, at the age of 33, the leg was no longer serving me, even after a failed knee replacement. So I knew that mobility would be different, but definitely possible again with hard work, rehab, and the right prosthetic
Mhm.
fitting moving forward.
Leg that this is even better. And I guess that's an educated process. And you mentioned it was your decision to have the leg amputated, so it wasn't the doctor's then.
Correct. And I was basically given two options whenever I got a second opinion from another orthopedic surgeon. Because when I had my knee replacement in 2021, that was kind of the best last ditch effort to salvage what was left of my right knee joint. And so it kept getting infected over and over again. So they said, well, if we just remove the knee joint, then that could mitigate these episodes of infection. And with the proper physical therapy and rehab, you can get semi-decent and normal range of motion to resume, some of the physical activities. But even with a knee replacement, you can't necessarily do heavy, high impact sports. I couldn't play pickup able body basketball anymore. So for me, it was just, okay, well, let's try one last thing to keep this leg. And unfortunately, when the orthopedic surgeon did the knee replacement, the wrong size hardware was placed into my leg and it was positioned wrong. So basically I was spending about 11 months of rehabbing my right knee, which could only bend about 45 degrees, which to have a normal walking gait, you need a minimum of about 90-degree bend. So
Oh,
I was constantly limping, constantly in pain. And I knew that something was not right because when I was doing home health, a lot of my patients who had hip replacements or knee replacements, they kind of had their new normal established about 4 to 5 months post-op. So for me, almost being 1 year post-op and not really making much positive progress, I knew something was wrong because I've always been the type of patient who's been very compliant and
mhm.
very hardworking in physical therapy or in off-season training, for example, in whatever sport I was participating in. So it's when I got that second opinion from another orthopedic surgeon, he was able to identify pretty much instantaneously from the x-rays that, for lack of better words, the initial knee replacement was botched. So I was basically left with two options. I was left with the option of getting a revision to the total knee replacement, which at that point would require a minimum of 3 additional surgeries. And at that point, I had already had 16 surgeries on that right knee. So I wasn't ready to endure 19
Sure.
because beyond that, if he put new hardware in, they would have to put a large rod in my femur and one in my tibia. And basically that life expectancy of that new hardware is only about 10 years. And so I was 33 at the time. So by the time I'm 43, it would have to be revised once again. And so to me, I didn't want to feel like I was walking on a ticking time bomb, so to speak. And so
Mhm.
option number 2 was to do a planned above knee amputation, which, when I first heard that, it definitely made me grimace. But when I heard how far they've come in the prosthetic technology and knowing that being someone who is relatively young and otherwise healthy, I
Mhm.
could not only recover quickly, but I could get fitted for the prosthetic and then I could start playing sports again or getting my mobility back and not having that severe chronic pain that I was battling for goodness 7-8 years.
This may be a strange question to the audience, but do you still feel the pain in the lower part of your leg, even though the biological leg is not there? Do you still feel pain?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I enjoy talking about. I don't enjoy experiencing it, but
Yeah.
it's called phantom pain.
Mhm.
And there's two types. There's phantom pain and there's phantom sensation. So I'll just high level explain the difference between the two. So when you have phantom pain, it's very, very common amongst limb loss patients or amputees. So especially immediately post-operative. In fact, I've yet to speak to a fellow amputee who hasn't experienced phantom pain post-op or post-trauma. So basically, for me, immediately following the amputation surgery, when I was recovering in the hospital the following day, it felt like my right calf and my right like foot and ankle was like on fire. It was really sharp, kind of a burning sensation, and it would kind of spasm. But it's such a trip because like I don't have a right calf or
I
ankle
know. Yeah.
anymore. So it's all neurological, and part of it is mental too. And then the other part is phantom sensation, which is not so much painful as much as it is annoying. So it'll kind of like will itch from time to time, or kind of feel like ants are crawling.
Oh my
Or I
gosh.
tell this to a lot. Basically, kind of what happens typically is, the orthopedic. So I had an orthopedic oncologist, and she basically performed the amputation. And immediately once she performed the amputation, I had a plastic surgeon who was in the operating room as well. He went in and performed a procedure called TMR, which stands for targeted muscular reintervention, where basically they take all of those nerve endings on the residual limb and they basically sew and attach it to your muscle in your hamstring or your quad. So when those nerve endings are firing away, they basically have a muscle to fire into. It's kind of like, if you had a telephone pole with the wires, you don't want those wires just firing into free space. That can shock somebody, So
Mm.
it's almost like an electrician coming in and fixing the nerve endings. So that's what my plastic surgeon did, which also helps pretty substantially minimize the intensity and frequency of phantom pain and phantom sensation. But
Okay.
that was basically the last I saw of those two surgeons. And then what most limb loss or amputees go to is they go to a physician who can basically write all the medical documentation that the insurance require for a prosthetist. So that's the term, a clinician or prosthetist.
Prosthesis. Mhm.
Those are the individuals who basically get you fabricated for your prosthetic, whether it's upper or lower extremity. And these are the experts. They're kind of like part engineers, but part clinicians who understand your body, understand your mobility goals, and can utilize all the different prosthetic manufacturers and the different technologies available to come up with ultimately a mobility solution that's best tailored to what your body type and what your
Okay.
goals and expectations are. So yeah,
So
I
do
go
you,
to my prosthetist every month to get little adjustments here and there as my body's still recovering from the surgery.
okay. Now, do they, is it a generic, prosthesis? Because I know insurance covered your general prosthesis.
Correct. Yeah,
Right?
my daily, this is my daily leg, and this is actually the technology is pretty fascinating. So this has a microprocessor, so it's really fancy. So it understands basically my walking gait patterns and weight distribution, and there's even Bluetooth connectivity, so I can literally take my iPhone here using the app for the manufacturer that I use. It connects my phone to my leg, and I can adjust the resistance. I can adjust basically if I'm going upstairs or downstairs. It kind of knows how to respond there. I
Wow.
mean, the technology is just
That's amazing.
incredible. We've come a long way since the old, kind of pirate peg legs that you see in the cartoons
Yeah.
and in old photos. And some are waterproof, and then some are just mechanical where they don't have any electrical components. It just kind of bends based on your weight. Those are a little bit more difficult to walk in, from my understanding, but this particular everyday leg, I know you saw me at the CAF running clinic. Not many people can run in a leg like this. I
Yeah.
did just kind of some short jogging and stuff just to kind of participate. But what most amputees who want to be really active and kind of take the sport to the next
Mhm.
level, they'll get a running blade prosthesis where they can really, take off. And there's so many different socket technologies too. So it's something that can be a little bit overwhelming at first to a newcomer into this community, but there are so many great resources and people like myself and James Dixon, who I know you know really well,
Mhm.
that are constantly advocating and opening our hearts and our direct messages for people who have questions about the journey and about what to expect when becoming an amputee, or maybe they've already been an amputee and they haven't been given accurate information, or they want to basically regain their mobility or get back into sport again. So we're constantly trying to encourage and motivate those individuals as well, regardless of what stage or age they are in their journey.
Okay.